Yeah, well, obviously, communication and relationship management have become even more important as a result of COVID. And in general, relationships that were already very open, transparent, and good prior to the pandemic kind of stayed that way. And we were able to really deepen and improve those relationships. But we noticed that where things were already tense and under some pressure or stress, things tended to deteriorate further. So for us, there's been this real concerted effort to spend much more time and effort in connecting with our managers during this period, both formally during the quarterly AC calls, as well as kind of informally bilaterally. And yeah, technology has helped us enormously. We've had a lot of video calls, online investor conferences, and we've also seen some of our GPs use videos of their portfolio companies to kind of replace the traditional site visits that we would conduct during an annual meeting. And so these are some of the ways that we've seen GPs kind of try to bridge this, on the ground gap. So yeah, we continue to adapt to this reality, and where possible, we're also starting to leverage local offices and infrastructure and investment partners. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, we've learned kind of nothing really replaces that pure human to human contact and connection on the ground. The last thing I'd like to note on this point is that I think what we've noticed with many of our managers is that it's been a very isolating period for many. And I think they already feel sometimes like they're out on an island in very difficult markets, trying to do the best they can. And so for us, it was really important to connect, very frequently, not only as investors, but really also human to human in this difficult time. Yeah, I find this a really fascinating question. And yeah, I think the pandemic is challenging a lot of preconceived notions or investment theses that we in the development community have held in emerging markets. And that one of them is this debate over local versus kind of international or fly in. And I can only speak anecdotally about our portfolio, but I think what we've seen is that our managers who are locally based and with local teams have been much more transparent and forthcoming about the impact of the pandemic on their portfolio companies and on the team and what's happening more generally in the local economic context. We've found that they've been able to better navigate and plan, prepare, and adapt for the continuously unfolding situation, just given their local knowledge and context. And not to mention that I think operating in these markets is already difficult and challenging as it is. So I think when you're used to currency fluctuations or political unrest or business slowdown, I think these local teams have been much better able to manage and navigate this experience, versus, some of our kind of fly in, fly out models. And I want to be careful here because it's not really black or white. And I think there's a lot of great commingled teams, who have been able to navigate this situation. But I do think it begs the longer term question, what is the sustainable model? And just speaking, personally, I really think that local teams are much better equipped, not only in a situation like COVID, but also just in general, better able to develop and deliver more sustainable economic and impact returns. Not to mention it's much more climate friendly. Yeah, absolutely. And a really great question, and something we've been thinking about and try to play a role with at Triple Jump as well. And I think from my perspective, it really requires a holistic approach. So it's, not one intervention is necessary. We really have to be looking at the broader ecosystem, from local institution capacity building, the types of financing available across the value chain, what kind of training, financial support, et cetera, is required. But I think it also really requires us to take a more demand-driven approach. I think historically, we've all had our mandates from our own investors with their own objectives that are saying, women is important, youth is important, et cetera. And I'm not saying that these things aren't, but I really feel we can do a much better job of engaging local communities, local stakeholders, and asking them, what is it that you need? How can we work together to support the developing and deepening of the ecosystem on terms that make sense for you, versus this kind of, coming from Europe or the US with an idea of what we think needs to be done. So yeah, I think if we can try to have a much more engaged, inclusive, and demand-driven approach, I think we can really help in strengthening and developing these local ecosystems. And yeah, ultimately, I think in the development world, our job should be becoming redundant, that we're not necessary, and that you've built sufficient local capacity, for them to make the investments that are going to make their countries and economies and people thrive.